I'm going to record to the computer. Do that. And starting in 3, 2, 1.
Hey, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to our webinar. We are working on a little bit of a new process today, so sorry that took us a minute to get started. We have Peg with us today to follow up on her class from a few weeks ago on cut flower gardens for winter and early spring. Today she's going to be covering cut flowers for spring and summer. So super happy to have her back. I'm excited for this class. For those of you who are new to our online classes, if you have any questions during the class, open up your Q&A box and you can type those questions in. Those questions will come to me and Peg will be taking questions periodically. For anybody who has been on these classes before, welcome back. We're glad to have you. Peg is one of our veteran instructors and designers and plant specialists here at the Garden Center. She worked on our Gardening Advisor television program for many years and has been teaching classes for many years as well. So we're happy to have her today. Peg, gonna go ahead and turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Sally, and welcome to the show, and I hope you're going to enjoy this. Now, Sally, did you ask them whether or not they have the
Oh,
lineup?
thank you, Peg. I did not. So Peg sent out an outline before the class with a list of all of the plants that she's covering on her slides today. So if you received those, that's fantastic. You can use those to follow along. If you did not, I'm about to send out the link via the chat box. And if you had any problems accessing it via that link, just let me know. We can get it to you in another way.
Okay, because I tried to be a little more, this is a learning process for us also, you know. I really am enjoying it, although I'd love to see all of you face to face. That just isn't possible right now. And so, yes, we divided this cutting gardens programming up into seasons, and we did cover winter and primarily winter and previously. But I do want to back up a little bit in this one and show you some of the things that we featured in that first show. I went out into my garden yesterday and I picked a number of Helleborus, okay? Just lots of them. I have a large property and I've been working on these for years. And they have multiplied generously because they drop seed all around them, and I'm very careful to take care of some of those seeds. And so I have a lot of them and a lot of different varieties because they're very promiscuous. You never know exactly what you're going to get with these, but I'm always surprised. I really say I haven't met a Helleborus that I didn't like. And so I love to float them when we're talking about arranging and cutting gardens. I love to float them. I did a few that are not floating, and I really don't like to cut long stems because then you cut away a lot of the buds and I feel, oh, no, I don't want to do that. So most of the time I float these, and they're beautiful doubles out there also. This is a really, really dark one. I hope you can see from there. And then here is another that's a double, and it's a lighter color. We are getting a lot of these into the garden center right now. I walked the walk this morning, and there's some real beauties. I hope, again, that you can see this incredible leaf. There's so much hybridizing going on in the industry today. There's always been a lot, but it just seems like, ooh, we have so many new varieties coming at us. This is lovely. A lot of the Helleborus sort of droop their little heads over. And I think I'm fascinated because this one has so much color on the top rather than lifting it to see what the color is on the inside. Now, because I have a lot of these, this is the time of year that you need to go out and clip away those old leaves. Now, these are not old leaves, okay, but I have plenty of old leaves in my garden. So out comes the little cushion to kneel on, and up comes the Velcro pruners and the joist scissors, and away I go. But it really needs to be done to tidy it up. And when I'm doing that, I'll pull the leaves back somewhat from it so that the little babies that are beginning to drop now will come up. Now, some people don't want that to happen. I do, because I've got, as I said, a lot of space and enjoy having those. So just wanted to touch again on the Helleborus because they're coming into the garden center right now. They're absolutely beautiful. It's a great time to plant. So let's bring up that first slide, Danny, and we'll show you some of the things that I enjoy. I went through this cutting garden not as an individual cutting garden, but as flowers that you can grow in your garden, regardless of the size, that you can enjoy through the seasons. I have a love affair with daffodils, and they will probably be coming into bloom in my garden by the end of next week, if not sooner, the very early ones. And I particularly like the miniature daffodils in beds because I can put them up near the front of the border, and then the foliage doesn't bother me when they begin to die back, particularly because you have a love-hate relationship with daffodils. The really big ones have a lot of foliage. You must let that foliage turn yellow to produce the next year's, and sometimes that's difficult. However, they play a big role in what I'm talking to you about today, which is flowers that bloom in the spring and enter into the summer. I love to start and buy here from the garden center annuals to place in between these daffodils oftentimes, because then they will bloom all summer and they'll cover that maturing foliage of the daffodils. I had one person mention last week that I really didn't do quite enough of what one plant looked good with another. But in actuality, I do that here because you try to plant things that will complement each other, and you try to plant things that will give you a continuity of bloom. Obviously, the daffodils have a period of bloom and then they go into the back of the stage, and along comes something else. And that something else in this picture happens to be Phlox stolonifera. This is a woodland phlox, and it's a native plant also. So this is a large area beneath old oak trees and native laurel. And so picture this one and picture this one. They are adjacent to one another. The first one was Phlox stolonifera. This one is Phlox divaricata, again a native perennial phlox planted with fern. It is difficult to beat fern in the garden, and you can harvest those and use them in arrangements too. And next to it is a hosta. Love my hosta. Those leaves are invaluable for using in arrangement. So now we're talking of plants that complement each other, and they're planted in a shady garden, okay? Love the morning sun, love good dappled light, not as fond of the hottest afternoon sun. Now, here is another one adjacent to, growing within that area, that comes slightly later. It's called pulmonaria, and it planted with daffodils in between, with a grass, carex, behind it. Okay, again, it's in that shade garden. Now let's go to the sunny spot. And this is one that I touched on slightly the last time, because I use a lot of perennials in this area, and I also use a lot of seeded annuals. What you are looking at in the front of that picture is Rudbeckia hirta, which I commonly call Gloriosa daisy. It has a long period of bloom. We do offer it both in the annual and perennial section. It's arguably a perennial, but it always comes back for me, And the beauty of it, it's seeds, and there are different varieties among those. So I've got quite a few that I've seeded in here. This is a bank. It was really red clay and extremely difficult to mow. And it was an area where there is a great deal of sunshine, and it's right adjacent to my property. And so I asked permission to plant it so that they would not have to mow it, and that it would be a bird, bee, and butterfly garden. And it has been very successful. So in this area, I'm showing you how I go about seeding things in. Now, a lot of these things, because I've been doing it for a while, drop their seeds naturally and they come up. Sometimes when you're starting fresh, you just need to prepare small areas in between perennials or in the place that's appropriate and put your seeds in. Watch carefully over them. I love to do many in the next slide. Here's an area that I did a similar kind with. I spread out the foxglove. This was a few years back. And the foxglove lived over the winter. I planted them in August and September, the seeds. They lived over the winter, came up, performed beautifully, and they were gorgeous with this large-headed allium. Now, we also have those foxglove available in plants in the spring. And sometimes you can start those in the spring also, and some will perform well for you later in the season. This was an arrangement that Bren took for us to use in marketing. And I really enjoyed going out and using some of the allium and some of these fun things to put together for a beautiful arrangement. Now, this one is an annual that I seeded into spots. It doesn't always reseed itself, and so I put a few extras in, but this one I wait until frost is past. The others go in August and September as seed, or can be seeded now in the garden. The first, if you seeded, would go live over the winter as tiny little plants, or wait, and they're coming up now in my garden, and they put on a wonderful show. So cosmos are a beautiful one, wonderful for picking, for arranging. Next to that is another one that really acts like a perennial for me, but drops its seeds, and it's the purple one that's called Verbena bonariensis, okay? Now, in that same area, next to that particular one, this is sort of the center of the bed, again, are a lot of perennials that are wonderful for arranging. There's gray Santolina in the front. It's an evergreen. It's beautiful right now in the wintertime, really. And it's wonderful for gray, both in the garden and also in your arrangements. And next to that is lavender that I cannot be without, but lavender is not the easiest plant in the whole wide world to grow. It has some definite needs, and that one of them is drainage. So does the Santolina. And so those two are growing at the top of that bed where they get excellent drainage. And I have added small stones and worked it in to break up the clay so that the drainage is really good. And actually, I'm quite pleased with how they are doing, the lavender and the Santolina. And if you enjoy cutting your lavender, that's fantastic. It's so fragrant. But when it finishes its first bloom, cut it back just below what has bloomed, and it will rebloom in the fall, which is fantastic. Long periods of bloom. Just behind that is another incredibly fragrant plant that is also evergreen, perennial, and it's Dianthus. I love cutting these, and they bloom heavily in the spring and then spasmodically through the summer and fall. Now, these are all perennials in this particular section. Now, here is another lovely one. This is the Santolina in bloom, and you can cut those blooms and use them in arrangements. The lavender is in bloom. As I said, when they're finished, cut those old blossoms back just into the edge of the foliage, and the lavender will rebloom, not necessarily the Santolina, but behind that with the beautiful orange that you see is the butterfly weed, Asclepias. And these are all flowers that the birds, bees, and butterflies absolutely love. Okay, here again is the lavender with another butterfly weed next to it. And next to that, the oriental lily. Now, let's come back to me, Danny, for just a moment. I want to talk to you for a second about some of the things you can do in your garden, because we're all anxious to get out into the garden. If you love the garden, you're anxious to get out into the garden. It's fantastic because Brenda and I were doing a little filming in my garden yesterday, and I had to do a little cleanup before we did that. So it was pleasant to be outside. We have now one of the most beautiful selections of bulbs. I'll show you some here. There's beautiful dahlias, there's beautiful lilies, and this is how they come packaged. And there's great value to buying them this way. And I love to get a head start on this. With the lilies, they need to go in the ground as soon as possible. Actually, as soon as you can work the ground, the sooner you get them into the ground, the better. In the meantime, I'm going to plant these. Look at these beautiful roots. That's a lovely bulb right there. I'm going to plant them in the small containers right now and put them where they'll get some light and they won't freeze, just to get a head start. And then as soon as I see some new growth and the weather warms up just a little bit and the ground is not so wet, I'm going to plant them directly into the garden. Lilies are fantastic. Okay, let's continue with those, Danny. Okay, let's go to the next one. There is a beautiful group of lilies. Oh, wow. Now, fair warning, the deer love these lilies. So you will need to spray them with Bobex. Spray them as soon as they're up out of the ground, and spray every 3 weeks until they've bloomed, okay? Because to me, they're just fantastic. I don't cut the entire stem when I harvest these for arrangements. I like to pick the individual blooms because I want all those blooms to be gorgeous and last for a very long time. And so they, to me, are just, again, along with lavender, they're one of the plants that I just cannot do without. And you're seeing now the allium that is sort of gone by. It's finished. It's beautiful purple color. I leave them up in the garden. They look fragile and they're not. They're absolutely, they're wonderful contrast in the garden. And once they're completely dried, actually you can pick them if you choose, hang on to them, spray them any color you'd like. And Christmas time, a lot of people spray them gold or silver. I have gone out into the garden, left them in the garden and sprayed them purple. And most people don't even know. Okay, in front of that was, that's okay. In front of that was sedum and sedum autumn joy. It is another one that the deer like, okay, but it is a stalwart in the garden. Now, let's go forward one more, and another one. Okay, because we were going backwards. All right. Yes, do I arrange with these? Yes, I do. I had this prized huge one in my back vegetable garden, which it is fenced, okay, because I don't want the deer in, and you can't spray vegetables with Bobex. So I created this arrangement. Bryn Wallace took the picture outside where ivy was growing on the side of a wall, and she's such a good photographer. Oh my, it's just a little ivy trailing out of that arrangement with a couple of big lilies. And I think it's some sedum autumn joy surrounding that, giving it its line. And so you can enjoy these inside, and oh my, they're very fragrant. So you can bring that fragrance inside. Okay, here is another valuable plant to have in your garden and to be able to pick and bring inside, and that's Nepeta. This one will bloom as many as 3 times. If you enjoy cutting some, bringing them into the house, then when that first blush of bloom is finished, which is 2 or 3 weeks or more, and you can cut that again back beyond the bloom, it will rebloom. Enjoy those, cut it back, and usually it will bloom for a 3rd time. So to me, this is a valuable plant. Okay, Bryn Wallace at work again. I love her photography. So we took this cart out into the edge of the woods here and stacked it with some of the most perfect perennials that blend well together. And then in the front, we put in a few annuals. And so the reason I'm showing you this is it's wonderful to use all of these things within the garden, and you can do that even in a small space. You have to be a little selective in a small space. It's amazing how many you can do in containers. But I like to think when I'm selecting these plants, when I'm selecting the perennials, when does it bloom? What color is it? What is going to look well with it? And then toward the front or even in between, well, what annual can I use there that will carry the bloom longer? Because most perennials have a period of bloom. And so it's really nice to be able to mix the annuals with that. Now, what is in that? Because it's difficult to differentiate all of that. There are iris. Now, bearded iris aren't top on my list for cut flowers particularly, except they're queens of the garden. They're spectacular. My old phrase is I want to pull the chair up beside them and enjoy them because they're fleeting. So pick those individual blooms, have a sweet little teacup or a sweet little container and tuck that individual bloom in there and enjoy it because it's going to last a day, okay? Now, there are other iris that will last much longer than that, and I like to have them all, okay? In that also is the Clematis, as you wish. It's a vine, and there are many different varieties out there. I love to pick some of those and bring them in and use them in arranging. There's the perennial Salvia, of which there are many. Again, pick those wonderful spikes. They're great contrast, both in the garden and in your arrangement. Pick those, and again, when that has finished its flush of first bloom, cut it back just to the beyond where it's blooming, and it will rebloom. And so you can get rebloom out of a lot of your perennials. There's also Achillea, coronation gold. Now that's a jewel. It blooms beautifully in the late spring, early summer. And if you prune back those heads when they begin to look a little tired, it will shoot out some stems below that. And though there'll be smaller blossoms, there'll be a lot of them. You can also periodically, when they're just opening up perfectly, you can cut some of those, bring them inside, hang them upside down, and they dry perfectly. So I'm always on the lookout for those things that I can use in dried flower arrangements also. Now, tucked into the front of that are petunias and New Guinea impatiens. Two different heights here. The petunias will cascade out. They're fantastic at the front of a border. The New Guinea impatiens will be taller, and you can work among the perennials. So what we're talking about here now is a sun garden. Now, what is a sun garden? I consider it sun as long as it gets full sun for at least 6 hours a day. And then you should have these plants thrive. This is the one of the many varieties of the Clematis or Clematis vine. Love, love, love these plants. And they're wonderful to bring in for arrangements, and they last a long time for me. So I do enjoy them. A lot of these will rebloom. We certainly don't have time to go into it today, but the pruning of clematis is of concern to a lot of people. But stop in and ask us about it if you're concerned, because it's not terribly complicated once you have a few of the rules, okay? Now, you'll always hear me say, get the children involved. Nature is such a wonderful thing, and I've dealt with it my entire life. I was born and raised on a farm. I was out into the soil planting plants, and I did with my children and did with, as you can see, my grandchildren. Now, this was Eamon a while back. He's 2.5 years old in this picture. Isn't it fantastic? Look at the placement of his little foot on that shovel. Now, it's not a teeny tiny little child's shovel. So give them something interesting. Get them intrigued. Give them something they can succeed with. Hey, take them out into the garden and let them pick some of those flowers and bring them in, because then they have ownership, and that's important. So introduce them to the garden. Okay, here are a couple of other long blooming and wonderful, wonderful plants for the garden. The one in the back is very airy. It is Gaura, Gaura. It blooms all season long without deadheading. And I love it when somebody says to me, oh, you don't have to deadhead that, because that can get a little boring at times. But cutting these things to bring into your home and arranging with them is deadheading in many respects, okay? And also in front of that is a perennial called Rose Campion or Lychnis. And that one blooms for a long period of time also. Yes. Now, this is a favorite, and I don't know if you can determine exactly where that little birdie is, but somewhere near the top with the sky behind it is a wonderful little birdie enjoying the seeds of the flowers that are planted in this area. I can come in the summertime and walk down this area next to this, and they'll just all immediately fly away. The little goldfinches, and that's a little goldfinch sitting there. So echinacea, wonderful. I love to try the new ones, but my old standbys are still the beautiful pink ones, okay? And shown in that picture too, that the birds love, is bronze fennel. It is, I just love to pop it into my mouth because I love the licorice taste of it, It seeds beautifully. The flowers are lovely. I love to bring it in to cook with and also to use in arrangements. But let me warn you that it's very prolific. It drops its seeds, which you could cut away and not have to worry about it, but I leave them because the birds love them. Now, I don't consider plants that seed heavily a problem, like Cleome and some of the things, because they're very easy to pull up. I can warn you that bronze fennel is not easy to pull up. It has taproot. but I can't imagine a garden without it. So it's a love-hate relationship. And that's the case with a number of things. Okay, we're dealing with phlox, the summer phlox, the Nicotiana alata, the Rudbeckia hirta, which is the gloriosa daisy. Then there's the variegated Caryopteris and annual Cleome. These are all plants that work beautifully together. They're all perennials except the Cleome, and all are candidates for harvesting, a few to enjoy in the home and leaving a lot to enjoy in the garden. Here's another picture of a beautiful phlox. Now, some of the phlox can get a little mildewy if they're late summer, if it's humid, which it usually is. I like these grown near the back. And if I should have a problem, which I haven't had for a couple of years, if I should have a problem with them, I'll cut them back pretty heavy and they'll usually come back, and depending upon when I cut them, they may bloom again. But I still have to have the summer phlox, and some are very mildew resistant. In front of that is also a perennial salvia, and I love, one is the soft lavender, and being fronted with this salvia is just beautiful because it shows off the purple of the salvia. Here is another variety of salvia. So go to the perennial section and pick out your absolute favorite. But I love this, and it's planted in front of something with a, I don't remember what it is, something with a gold foliage, so it makes that purple really shine. I love it. Here is a workhorse in the garden. This one used to be called Astramaria. It's been renamed Kalimeris. Kalimeris. It is a perennial. It blooms in full sun, or it blooms in a lot of shade, which is amazing. And you don't have to deadhead this. I love it because it lasts for a long time in arrangements. It blooms heavily. It blooms heavily until frost kills it. The only thing that you have to do is, if it's happy, it is a strong grower. Now, I'm not saying invasive. That's not the case. It's a strong grower. So you just have to take out a few every now and then and share them with your friends, okay? But, oh, I do love this flower. Here is a picture of it as it sort of backed off a little bit. And growing among that, toward the front of that border, is perennial Roseanne geranium. This is absolutely one of my favorite geraniums. It's very rangy, and so it meanders into its companion plants, and it blooms all summer long without deadheading. That's geranium Roseanne, and it makes a great cut flower. When you use these things as cut flowers, you are encouraging them to continue to bloom, because with annuals and perennials, their greatest ambition is to reproduce themselves. And if you confuse them on that, they keep trying and they keep blooming, okay? Now, here's another iris. This one will again, be one of those that doesn't last terribly long in a vase, but it is grown for me for its foliage. I love this variegated iris. And actually, I can see mine just beginning to peep up in the garden right now. Variegated foliage and a contrast of shape and texture is always good to use in arranging inside. Here in the front are the German iris, okay, which, as I said, only one lasts for a day, and it's only good for me, and I always do it, is bring them in individually. What I'm actually wanting to show you is in the middle ground is the purple, which I love purple. In the center is that Nepeta, catnip Nepeta. And behind it is again a wonderful perennial that I enjoy in the garden too. It's, can you believe just the moment I blanked out of exactly what that is. Let me go back to my, go back to my own notes and see if I am clear there. Okay, it's Baptisia. Thank you. It happens every now and then, okay? Baptisia. Now, look how tall those spikes are. They're beautiful to bring in as a spike into your home. And then when they finish blooming, they set these heavy pods, which are very interesting. They could be used in dried flower arrangements, but I leave them up. And the birds, bees, and butterflies all love these plants. Okay, they really, really do. Okay, now if we can shift to the next one. I know you're checking something, Danny, but let's shift to the next one. Okay, here is another Agastache. You'll find the Agastache primarily in the perennial section. And I don't often name varieties particularly, but this one is Blue Boa, and I'm pretty sure we'll have that variety this year. I love it because you can harvest some of those to bring inside, and that will encourage it to continue to bloom for a long period of time. And the next one, Danny, is a wonderful Gloriosa daisy. That's the yellow one. You can see the Schubert tie, that lovely allium that looked like a starburst in it. In the very front of that, there's also a wonderful purple there. I love to have purple in the garden. That one is more shrubby. It's Perovskia. And then up near the top, you'll see the little orangey blossoms of a Dahlia. That's one of the series that, if we come back to me, Danny, for just a moment. Can't come back to me right now. Okay, okay. Well, we can do that a little bit later. Okay. So we go to the next one. Okay, we're trying to check out things.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, sorry, Peg. It looks like the original camera just died, everybody. So we're just switching over. So, Peg, that's what's going on. But we've got it.
Okay, well, you know what?
We
were with the punches. I did a TV show for over 20 years. I am very accustomed to dealing with what's going on. You have to do that because we're all dependent upon these wonderful things that we have to work with today. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to share all of these experiences. Okay, let's come back. We were talking about dahlias. And this is a small one, which is just great for arranging. And the packages, the selections are incredible. And there's two in here. This one has dark leaves, okay? But there's so many varieties to choose from. Here is one that's a decorative dahlia. This is a much larger one. And I believe there's two in here too, and they're really quite large. I would open the bag, but I'm not sure you could even see it. But anyway, they're all up now, and there are some beauties there. These are wonderful cut flowers. I like to, again, I showed you the lily, and here again, I'm going to bend over for a second. I showed you the lily definitely with these dahlias, because you cannot put the dahlias, and you can put the lilies in anytime you can work the ground. They're fine. They're perennials. The dahlias are bulbs that will be killed by the cold. So you don't want to put them in the ground yet. Sometimes they'll get established and they'll overwinter, but you can't depend upon that. I dig mine in the fall. I love to start these particularly inside, and now's a good time to do it. I plant them in these containers just with a good potting soil. Let them grow where they get light in your house or under lights if you have them. I do it in a window. Let them get up. When they get up so high, you can pinch the top out. They will come out from that and be heavier. And then that gives you a head start. They will begin to bloom midsummer, and they'll bloom until frost kills them. And the more you cut to bring inside and enjoy, the heavier they'll bloom and the longer they will bloom. So now I think we can go back to, if we can go back to the slides now. It's working. Let's go on to the next one, honey. All right, I told you you need to start them early, right? Well, this proves to you that I started mine early also. This was my firstborn, okay? And he's standing next to dahlias, 2 huge dahlias, because he's probably 2.5 maybe, and the dahlias are as tall as he is, okay? At that time, I belonged to the Dahlia Society. And I planted quite a few that I was planning to show and very carefully labeled them. And then we had a nice heavy frost, and his little brother came into the kitchen and he had his hands full of tags. And the frost had come and killed all the plants back. And he said, Mommy, you don't need these tags anymore because they're dead. I think that was the end of my Dahlia Society days. I said, I don't know what they are now. I can't show them because you can't show something if you don't know its name. And so we just laughed and moved on to the next thing. We gardeners go through phases anyway. So he just helped me get out of that phase. Okay. All right, next one. Again, we're going back to another Agastache. And I do love these plants because these 2 here are hummingbird favorites. I think it's Cardona that's with that, and with orange Agastache. 2 that I really do enjoy, long blooming. And I love the purple and orange together anyway. This is plants that work well together. Okay, next one. Here's one that I really enjoy. It's an annual. Comes in a lot of different colors. There was a time when it was primarily purple, but now there are others there. And blooms for a long period of time, has nice long stems on it, and is an incredible dried flower. In fact, if you feel it, it feels dry when you're looking at it, okay, or feeling it. So Gomphrena. And in the next one, among those things that are great for cutting to do arrangements with, or cutting to bring into your kitchen, are the herbs. And among all of my herbs, and a lot of them I grow in containers, I love to grow basil, because basil really sends up, and I let some of it go to seed, because oh my, do the butterflies and the bees love that. So basil is great for cutting. I have to have petunias. I have to have, not petunias, marigolds. You can eat those too if you can take the flavor, okay? A lot of people use them for decorating in their cooking. Nasturtiums, which I actually love the flavor of and love to use on salads, and can't be without some zinnias among those things. But yes, herbs make great things to bring inside for cutting and to cut to cook with. Here are my herbs in containers, all outside the back door. I was not able to do that until the last 2 or 3 years because, fortunately or unfortunately, I lost a huge oak tree. So now I have sunshine there. But a lot of things can be grown in containers. Okay. On this is the opposite side. And in that area, in all those areas, I do nasturtiums mixed with these, all in containers. I do marigolds. I do all those fun plants that are beautiful, but that you can bring inside. Here again, wonderful plants out in the vegetable garden. And in that center area are calendulas. That's another one that loves the cool weather, by the way. In fact, all of those do. The nasturtium loves cool weather too. You can put it out as long as you harden it off, and it'll take a light frost. So will the calendula, and the calendula you can use for garnish in your cooking too. And there's salvia there also. Okay, here's a beautiful. I loved growing these nasturtiums last year in a large strawberry jar. They were just beautiful. And I have to pinch a leaf every time I pass by because I love to munch on it. It's fantastic. Okay, we always have to deal with this. Bambi is beautiful. And I get to see a lot of Bambis. I do. So keep your Bobex handy. It's the thing I rely on. Yes, there are others, and some people alternate, but you can't put it on your herbs and well, you don't have to put it on the herbs because they don't eat herbs, but they do eat your vegetables, and you can't spray your vegetables. If Bambi doesn't want to eat it, neither will you. Okay, but I love that picture. Okay, there are lots of wonderful things, perennials that will draw the bees and the butterflies, and we need to encourage those. So throughout all of these cutting flowers, I'm encouraging you to do the birds, bees, and butterflies. You cannot beat zinnias. The butterflies love zinnias. They are a fantastic cutting flower, and that encourages them to bloom. Now we got the top off of this arrangement. How about that? Well, anyway, this is Bryn's work. She is the photographer, and she wanted some vegetables to trail out of this container. And so I cut all of my zinnias from that area, and I have peppers there, and there's the little cherry tomatoes there. So you see, just about anything is a candidate for bringing in and using in a container. Now, I particularly like this because I'm fussy about the containers that I use. That is a very white container. And so there are white zinnias in that arrangement. So that picks up the color of that picture. And then the little cup and saucer next to it also has white in it. So you've got some continuity. That's what you want in your garden. That's what you want in your arrangement. Unless you're doing what I do a lot. And that is, if I'm going through the garden and picking some flowers, I am very likely to come in and put them into the closest mason jar. Okay. I love flowers in the house, and they don't have to be perfectly arranged. All right, encouraging people, get out in the garden. This one has gotten all grown up now, grandson, Liam. Give these kids something they can be excited about to get them out in the garden. Allow them to pick those flowers and bring them in the house and put them in a mason jar, or teach them how to arrange them. Either way. I needed a little retaining wall, and I had quite a few small stones. And I said, Liam, this is the area that I would like this. Go to it. And I did not say a word to him, but he did it. And he was so pleased with himself when he finished. So this is how you succeed with the children in the garden. Don't set them to weeding. There's nothing fun for a kid in weeding, but they do love all the other aspects of the garden. That's for sure. They can help you with many things, okay? We should have maybe, no, I think that was our last one. So we will close on Liam. I do believe we have just a few minutes for questions.
We have a few minutes for questions. So just want to give a quick reminder to everybody before we start. We'll probably not be able to get to all of your questions. So if you do have any and that we aren't able to get to, please feel free to hit reply on those confirmation emails, or send me an email, and we can help get your questions answered after class. So Peggy, here's our first question. We had a couple of people asking questions about the Helleborus. What are some good companion plants for those flowers?
Well, among the companion plants that I have are fern. I have a lot of fern, and the beauty of it is that the deer, because I've got large area, and these are back beneath oak trees in various types of light, but they do need some sunlight, okay, to do well. So ferns are beautiful with them. A lot of those first plants that I showed, they really have nice foliage, and if you have a number of them, you'd have to do a swath of the Helleborus and then a swath of the fern, but you could also use things like those blocks among it. Right now, I also have at the edges the little bulbs that are in full bloom, which is a wonderful complement to it, the little snowflakes. Um, so bulbs are a good thing. There are a lot of the shade perennials that are lovely with Helleborus.
Do you know if someone receives some back in October and they're not blooming? I know I've had a few people ask questions about that. Do you know if there's a reason why those flowers might not bloom?
You're talking about Helleborus?
Yes, yes.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. This is why I'm leaning my ear toward in your direction. Um, is it an established plant that isn't blooming?
No, well, she planted them back in October.
They need to get established possibly this year. Everything has to have a growing period to get established and then begin to bloom. If they are not showing buds yet, it may be another year, but you have to begin sometime. Okay. That's the only reason that plant isn't blooming. It just needs to get a little more established, and that may take a year.
Perfect.
Or maybe I have them in various stages at my home too. Some bloom early, some mid, some a little late. And sometimes it depends upon your own little environment within your garden. It may be warmer in spot than another spot, so it comes earlier. So maybe it hasn't set its buds yet.
Thanks, Peg. Okay, so next question is about bulbs. So this person specifically asking about tulips and daffodils. If her tulips and daffodils are starting to come up, can she dig them up now and move them to another place, or does she need to wait until after they've bloomed and the leaves have withered a little bit before she moves them?
Well, I think it's perfectly all right to do that right now. Depending upon how wet the garden is. My garden's very wet right now. I don't know that I'd want to go out. Of course, I'm low too, a low area that stays a little bit on the wet side. As long as you can work the ground without it being muddy and hard, if she's careful and takes them in a root ball, she can move them now if that's what she wants to do or feels she needs to do. Otherwise, you would wait until they bloomed and enjoy that and are beginning to turn yellow, and then you could move and divide them. The beauty of moving daffodils in the springtime when they're in bloom or just going out of bloom is that you can see where your other bulbs are, because I get so discouraged, and I have so many bulbs. I get so discouraged if I dig into them, and that's easy to do in the fall if you're not careful. Okay, so when I'm transplanting, I sometimes will do it in the springtime simply because then I know where the other plants are. So go for it.
Thanks, Peg. The next question is, once you've cut your flowers, do you have any tips to keep them peppy and lasting longer once they're cut?
Absolutely. Conditioning flowers is very important. Number one, I recommend taking a bucket of water with you out in the garden. That's not an absolute necessity. And I'm not going to tell you I do that 100% of the time. So oftentimes I'll stroll through with a handful of flowers and go back into the house and put them in a deep container of water to soak for a while before I actually put them in an arrangement. If I'm throwing them into a mason jar, I put them in the mason jar, okay? So I'm a little casual about that. But there's also the little granulars that you can buy that are preservatives, and put a teaspoon, and it will tell you the ratio to use. But anyway, put them into clean water, and every 2 or 3 days, just pour the water out and put some fresh water in, and that will help with the flowers. Okay.
Thanks, Peg.
Oh, and let me tell you one thing with the daffodils. You need to put those daffodils separately into some water and let them sit in that water for 3 or 4 hours before you mix them with anything else, because the seepage from them is toxic to a lot of flowers. So keep those daffodils separate for 2 or 3 hours at least in its own water before you mix them in with other flowers. Okay. Glad I remembered that.
I had no idea. I had no idea about that. All right, so next question is, if flowers like Rudbeckia, Monarda, and Liatris do well for years and then they suddenly stop blooming, do you know what might have what could have happened?
Well, if they have Liatris that has been blooming well for them in the past, and now, well, let's say last year came up but did not bloom, is that the question?
Yes, like the Rudbeckia and Liatris, and they apparently have been blooming for years just fine. They've been doing really well, and then this past year they didn't bloom at all.
Did they get enough sunshine? Things change in your garden. You get shade, we plant trees, and that's a wonderful thing. But then all of a sudden, an area, and I've had plenty of this happen to me, all of a sudden, an area that had a lot of sunshine doesn't have a lot of sunshine anymore. Or it may need, they're too thick and need to be divided and separated and moved out. Now, when I'm doing that, I don't want to, like Liatris, it's got a little bit of a bulb down underneath. And when you dig that up, I don't want to separate it out so thinly that it's going to take forever for it to come back and bloom. I want to maybe divide it 2 or 3 times and put it out so that, yes, next year it will bloom well. So that could be 2 reasons, okay? That should not be the case with Gloriosa daisy. Mine blooms as long as it gets it probably gets 7 hours of absolute direct sunshine, and it grows pretty thickly and it still blooms pretty well. So I can't totally tell the answer to that unless I know a little bit more about the environment. Okay.
She actually just wrote back and said she thinks that it might be that her oak trees grew taller and are blocking out the sun now. So thank you.
That's your reason then. Not enough sunshine.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question, we had a couple people ask, so they saw your beautiful allium photos and they wanted to know what type of allium that was, or if you had any recommendations of favorite kinds.
I've grown an assortment of the globe alliums, and I really don't remember exactly which ones those were. I think they were Sensation, which is not the really biggest globe one, but more in the 8-inch kind of thing. And it's a little bit smaller bulb. So I think it was Sensation in the one. And then it was Schuberti in the last one where it had all the spikes coming out. That one was Schuberti. And that's a fun one because it looks like fireworks. Okay.
Thanks, Peggy. All right, we have time for one more question. So the last one I'm going to ask is we had someone write in and ask what your favorite flowers to start from seed are.
My favorite ones to start from seed are those that I plant in August and September, the fall, to be in the ground and either come up and live over winter, or as there a lot of them are coming up right now, or go and plant them in the garden now. Okay. What are my favorites among those? Larkspur, bachelor's button, love in a mist. Those are all hardy ones. Plus there's some others I'm sure that I'm not going into right now, but those are top of the list for me to go ahead and sprinkle about into the garden and enjoy. And they will tolerate the cold. Some of the others I like to start inside, and the ones that I start inside are the nasturtiums and the marigolds, so that I get a head start on those because I want a lot of those. And I plant them among the herbs, and it's just beautiful. So I guess those are kind of my favorites. Yeah.
Thank you, Peggy. All right, so it is 1 o'clock now. So everyone who, if we didn't get to your questions, please again, feel free to email us after we have recorded this class. That recording will be available within the next 24 hours or so. And if you missed Peggy's first class, we had a few people asking about that. We have a recording of that class as well, and I'd be happy to send you that so that you can catch up. Peggy, do you have anything you want to close off with?
Well, yes, I really did enjoy the feedback and the comments, because this is a learning curve for us as well as you, hopefully. And it's awfully nice to hear from you as to what you would enjoy in the future, or did you learn anything here, or do you have any suggestions? That was very good. So
Thank
thank
you.
you for watching.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody, thank you for listening in. We look forward to having you at the next class. And again, please feel free to contact us with any questions, and take a look for that coupon and that survey that's coming out later this afternoon. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon. Thanks, Peggy.
Thank you.